recording. There we go. So like I said, this is our new user webinar part 3, using assessments with success. Those who register for the session will get a follow-up email with a copy of the slide deck and a video recording, and the session will be interactive. In this case, you don't need to log into assistments.org, but we are going to share a handy document that you can use to follow along and reflect on key components within this webinar as we go. And so, like I said, I'm Brian Story. I'm the Director for Teacher Engagement at ASSISTments. Prior to this work, I was a public school teacher in Washington, D.C. and Norfolk, Virginia for a decade. And so I'm definitely happy to have you all with us today. And with that, I'll let Viviane introduce herself.
I am Viviane Piketowski. I teach 6th grade at Bill Libben Elementary. It's in Santa Maria, California. And I've been using assessments for a few years, and I absolutely love the program.
Excellent. Thank you, Viviane. So our goals for today, or our goal for today, is that participants are going to think critically about successfully implementing assessments in their classrooms in order to establish a strong weekly routine. To sort of meet that goal, we're going to talk about finding a strong starting point, planning your weekly routine, anticipating and navigating common implementation challenges, and leveraging the Teacher Corner and the variety of user resources that we have available on the website as well. You'll notice here that it mentions the implementation planning guide. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Just as a quick intro about assessments, we typically think about the teacher routine in 4 steps: assigning, students completing an assignment, teacher grading, and teachers using that data to inform their instruction. And so assessments enhances this process. Instead, teachers can assign online from our assessments content library. Students get immediate feedback as they complete their assignment. The teacher analyzes the data report instead of grading, and the teacher shares data with students and uses it to take action. And so now that we're kind of getting into the session, I want to talk a bit about the implementation planning template, which is kind of the backbone of today's session. And so Viviane is going to share a link in the chat to our implementation planning template. And what you want to do is you can open this. It should automatically make a copy for you, but if not, just make sure you make a copy. And you can use this to kind of follow along and think about key questions and topics to really make sure you end the session with a solid understanding about how to make the most of assessments in your classroom routine, right? You can personalize the title, keep this handy as we go through the session, and the response boxes, you'll notice, are lettered as you go through after this first page here to show where we are. So I'll constantly reference those, and I'll go live to the doc to show you where we are at key points. So now that we've gone through our intro there and talked a little bit about assessments and our implementation planning template, we're going to dive into the material, and we're going to start with finding your strong starting point. And as many of you may already know, there are many ways to use assessments. We're a flexible and teacher-powered tool. Teachers see the greatest success when they select one strong starting point to build on. And so the key question you want to think about here is, how do you see yourself using assessments? Even if you've used assessments up to this point, what does that really strong, solid routine look like when you're building positive culture and making the most of the platform in your classroom? So I want you to just take a moment and if you scroll down in your implementation planning template, right here in box A is where we are. So if you just take a moment and jot down, how do you see yourself ultimately using assessments? How do you see yourself ultimately using assessments? And we have a few teacher profiles here that you can reference if you want to mention one of those as well. And we'll give folks about a minute or so to think about that, and then record what they think in box A of your copy of the planning template. Okay, and I know we have some attendees who are kind of on the go right now. You can feel free to just think about these questions as well. And still, share as needed if you'd like. So, how do you see yourself using assessments? Typically, we have these we think about users of assessments and four teacher profiles. So the first profile is teachers that use assessments for additional practice as a supplement to their core curriculum. Here, this teacher said, I assign skill builders and practice problems through assessments to help provide students with extra practice where they need it most, especially for upcoming tests. Teacher profile 2 is focused around using assessments as a digital companion to their core curriculum. So in this example, the teacher says, I use illustrative mathematics and assign practice problems together in class while they answer each question online. At the end of the session, I assign the cool down and homework. Every day, I go to the assessments assignments page to review the data from my class assignments. I use these data to guide my instruction the following day. Teacher profile 3 is a teacher that uses assessments to support small group or one-to-one learning. So here, this teacher shares, students in my classes exhibit a wide variety of skill and knowledge levels. I use assessments data to target subgroups and individual students. All students get the support they need in my classes. And then finally, we've got teacher profile 4. And this teacher is a teacher who uses assessments for all formative practice and assessment in their classroom, right? So in this case, the teacher shares, depending on the lesson, I use assessments to support all aspects of my daily routine. This includes assigning from my core curriculum, supplemental practice, and small group work. And so now that you've had a chance to sort of think about this question of, how do you envision using assessments and think about these four teacher profiles, I want you to think about this question. Which one of these profiles comes closest to you? And what we're actually going to do is just have you share teacher 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat. So we'll do this in the chat. And we appreciate, like I said, we have a small group today. So if you can, feel free to share where you think you fit within these teacher profiles. And if you don't, you can share that too. And in fact, since we have such a small group, you can also unmute and share if you like. Okay, so Beverly, and that was a direct message to me, so I'll share that one out loud. It said that she was more like teacher 1, so using assessments to supplement core curriculum with additional practice. Did anybody else share comments, Viviani?
Yes, Christina said number 1, but she'd love to use it more.
Mm-hmm. All right, excellent. So yeah, a lot of teachers, I'd say the majority of our teachers use assessments to supplement a core curriculum that they're already using, like Illustrative, Open Up, or Eureka. So that's very common. But as is often the case, you might get the basic amount of practice in a lesson, but if your kids need reinforcement or to build their fluency in a skill, you have to go elsewhere and get some additional problems. And so assessments can be that place for you to do that. So based on your profile, we want to think about what is a good, strong starting point. And basically, there are a few different options we'll go over here, but record your thinking in box B of the implementation planning guide. So when we go back to the guide here in box B, go ahead and just think about and record which starting point makes the most sense for you in your classroom. And some examples include, but are not limited to, assigning daily exit tickets from your curriculum, using assessments for homework, creating short do-nows to use at the start of class, providing a weekly practice assignment to a small group of students that need more support, or assigning diagnostics from Eureka Math before starting a lesson. So those are just some examples, but go ahead and take about a minute and think about what is a good, strong starting point. What's the most high leverage place or part of your lesson where it makes sense given your teacher profile and what you want to do. And again, we're recording that in box B of our implementation planning template. Okay, so now that folks have had a chance to sort of think about this in terms of their own routine in their own classrooms, uh, wanted to give folks a chance to stop and jot also in your implementation planning template, but box C, based on your preferred teacher profile and your preferred entry point, take a minute to jot down your own personalized profile. How do you see yourself using assessments within 3 months? So we're trying to take what we've sort of established so far and think about where do you want to be in 3 months with assessments. And you can record this in box C of the implementation planning guide. I've also included an example here that you can think about as well if you're trying to see where you should go with your thinking. And we'll come back together in about 3 minutes. So this is all about trying to make sure you're clear on your routine, what advice we can give you to support that routine, and answering any questions you might have about building out that routine. Okay, we're going to come back together in about a minute and a half. All right, so hopefully folks are wrapping up, or you've already had a chance to wrap up your thinking on this question. So based on what you put in box C, and again, you can share in the chat or feel free to unmute and share aloud. How do you see yourself using assessments within 3 months? And I'll give folks a chance to respond, but feel free to share that in the chat or again, unmute and share aloud. We have a small group today. All right, do we have any responses coming in the chat, Viviani?
Sorry, Christine says that she'd like to use assessments several times a week for daily independent practice, or like the do now, as the students enter the class, so that she can see who is understanding the material and she can address the student needs.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you can definitely get there. And like I said, we have a lot of resources you can leverage to help you get there within 3 months as well. Okay. So this is typically a breakout, but we do have a small group today. What we're going to do is just take some, again, sort of take some time. We'll do about 3 minutes. And the goal is to sort of think through different ways to approach incorporating assessments in your classroom by thinking about your personal profile, your strong starting point, and addressing why you want to take your approach. Really, what you should be able to do, I guess we can, we're not really going to be able to do a breakout group. I guess now would be a good chance to share any questions, comments, or wonderings that you have as you build out your routine. If you want to share that with us, you can feel free to unmute and share aloud. So sorry about that. No, Zoom is not going to let me do that, apparently. There we go. So yeah, just share aloud. What was I saying? What questions, wonderings, or ideas would you like to share around getting your routine up and running, or issues you've run into, or any questions about what we've talked about so far?
Yeah, hi, Brian. It's Christine.
Hi, Christine.
So like I said, I've used it so far. I've used assessments for basically homework, but sometimes I do prepare where I take a couple of questions that I have found that apply to my topic, and we'll do it as sometimes I'll start one with the class and then have them work on them individually after that. But I really would like to start using it more, but I just need more time to just dive into this and really see what else you have in there and all of the different questions I can choose from. So it just takes a while to go through all of the material you have. Um,
Sure. Understandable. So we'll have some time toward the end where we can actually go through and take a look at some of the content that we do offer. And I'm very familiar with our content library, so maybe I can point you in the direction of some resources that you'd find useful for your class.
okay, great. Thank you.
Excellent. So planning your weekly routine. Students are most engaged with assessments when teachers establish a consistent routine and they see how you're using the data. So another key question to think about here is, based on your strong starting point, what might a snapshot week look like for you and your students? Okay, and so the way we want to think about this is just take a moment and capture your thinking in the weekly schedule in your implementation planning guide. And you want to think about what would you assign and when, how will you use the data, and when and how will you share the data with students. If you already know how you want to use it on a day-to-day basis, you can feel free to, to focus more on the part about when and how will you share data. A lot of times teachers will get started with assessments and they'll like the data, but maybe they don't use the data or use it to plan instruction, or they're not communicating key data points to students. And so it's really, really important that you think about throughout the week, what does this routine look like, right? One example would be, okay, on Monday, let's say you assign homework on the concepts that were covered that day during class. Students do their homework, maybe it's due by midnight, and the next morning you come in and you identify using your assessments data report which specific questions to go over, how to organize small groups for the warm-up, things like that based on the data. So that's just what we want you to think about. And again, if you want to focus on what it looks like to share the data and when you would do it, you can think about it that way as well. And so we want to give folks about 3 minutes or so just to think about that and jot down their thinking. And then I also noticed that Beverly shared in the chat, she'd like to use it for daily exit tickets and review it for the next day's goals 2 to 3 times a week, and be able to give leveled work to different groups, and also using curricula that are different from her own. So basically using our different curricular resources as a supplement. So that's super interesting. When you're thinking about what it looks like to review for the next day's goals, what you want to think about there is, are you looking at the data and then just designing modifications to your lesson accordingly? Are you looking at that data and identifying key data points to share with students and tell them how it drives instruction? You really want to think about a way to communicate the data as you're, drawing a straight line to what they're doing in class and why you've decided to have them do that to support their learning, especially when you have students that are sort of at different, especially vastly different levels in class. It's going to be really important to build that investment and that positive class environment around using assessments. So just take about 3 minutes and think about when and how will you share this data with students? How will you use the data, and what would you assign and when? And we'll come back together in about 3 minutes. Okay, we're going to come back together in about a minute to a minute and a half. Okay. So what I want to do now, now that we've had a chance to think through, and again, we have a small group, so we won't do this as a breakout, but we want you to take 5 minutes. We're going to take probably more like 3 to 5 minutes, really, and just think about one challenge you anticipate with your weekly routine, and share any potential solutions to that. So let's start with just challenges and roadblocks. And you can share these in the chat, or you can unmute and share aloud. Just any challenges or roadblocks you foresee in implementing your routine with ASSISTments. And as a note in your implementation guide, down here, you can jot down any common challenges in these boxes I, J, and K. We'll have a chance to sort of discuss potential solutions to those in boxes L, M, and N. Right. Viviane, do we have any responses coming in the chat?
Yes, Beverly says that reviewing work from 6 classes has been challenging. I can only imagine.
Oh, absolutely.
And Christine says that the challenge is time. She only has 40-minute classes and time is always short.
Those are both very, very sort of not just common across many different teachers using ASSISTments, but just sort of common challenges that teachers face in general, right? How do you grade 6 classes worth of papers, give some sort of timely feedback, and also have, some sort of life outside of the classroom, right? Work-life balance is important. A happy teacher means you can have happy students. And then in terms of short class periods, we used to have what we called a skinny period. And so it was the same content. We saw the kids every day, but 40 minutes, once you get into, the warm up and you take out the cool down time, you really don't have a whole lot of time to get kids into the material for that day before they're already out the door. Right. So I want to hold those challenges. I want to think about those and we're going to discuss some potential solutions for them. And we will get there. Like I said, we're not going to finish this through the breakout, but we are going to get to those challenges and sort of discuss those and how you can leverage ASSISTments to meet them. All right. So now would be a good time, since we're at this question slide, to just think about those challenges that you shared. And so for the first challenge of reviewing work from 6 classes has been challenging. When you're thinking about grading papers, do you typically think about you're going to grade every single thing on that paper for accuracy, or do you typically think about focusing on high leverage questions that really indicate student understanding? And you can share in the chat, unmute and share aloud, just share what you think. How do you typically grade papers?
So Beverly says that she always gives too many problems and it's hard to see exactly where the students went wrong.
Mhm. I think that's a super prescient issue, especially when you're, giving paper workout. Kids need a lot of practice to build fluency with math concepts, right? And so you probably have a lot of answered practice questions coming your way. How do you sort of sort through that, right? So with ASSISTments, when you're using it and you get that data report, there are really a few key data points that if you focus on can help to drive your instruction at the whole class, subgroup, and individual student level, right? And I see the comment about skill builders as well. So when you're thinking about your assignment report, and I want to see if I can just go live over to an assignment report here. I did not have that set up, but since the issue's coming up, I want to make sure we have a moment to address it. And feel free to share any other comments or sort of potential roadblocks and challenges, possible solutions in the chat while I get this open. Okie dokie. That should be about to load here. So just going into an assignment report here, I'm going to go to one of our assignment reports that's already sort of pre-populated. The big things that are going to help you are if you go down to the detailed report, you always want to look at those problem averages. So those will tell you, if you have low problem averages, which problems do you need to do whole class review around, or which concepts may be challenge points for the entire class. For instance, you notice these questions where the average score is below 60%. That might be a way of focusing on those questions. So problem averages. You've got your common wrong answers, and these show you where common student misunderstandings are. So here we can see of all the students that answered incorrectly, 33% put the wrong answer 9 and 20% put the wrong answer 1. So having either whole group or small group discussions around what might have happened, how can you avoid this problem in the future, that can be super useful to target common misunderstandings. And then you've got the student average scores, and I'm just going to show these columns here. So you've got the student average scores, and so obviously you can pinpoint individual students here that are in need of assistance based on having scores below a certain level. You can also use the arrow here to sort students in ascending or descending order if you want to do groups based on like a green, yellow, red type intervention structure in your class. So really it's those 3 key data points that are going to help to drive your instruction most often. And so if you don't have a lot of time to look at 6 different data reports and look at them in a super extensive level of detail, focusing on the problem averages, those common wrong answers, and student average scores are going to be the quick, easy way for you to determine what those whole class, smaller group, and individual level interventions might look like. And typically, once you get into that routine, it won't take more than a few minutes to identify, which things fit into which bucket. And then someone mentioned skill builders. Yeah, so with skill builders, one important thing to think about is, if a student who's answering the first 3 questions correctly and they're done, like they're kind of demonstrating mastery, pretty high level of mastery. If it takes students 10 problems to get 3 correct in a row, maybe they're getting toward mastery but need additional practice. So it's really just about thinking about how often the students are experiencing a challenge and putting in those incorrect answers as they go. And the skill builder report will make that pretty obvious to you. So that's one sort of view to take on the skill builder report. And then yeah, so one solution that came up in the chat, thanks Beverly, is just assigning less problems fewer times per week at first. I would definitely advocate for that. We're going to talk about that in a minute, actually. You want to make sure you build that routine and build student confidence and sort of growth mindset around using the platform in class before you start trying to use it for anything and everything. We are flexible, so you can definitely use it for everything in your class if you want to get that quick data and, you know, modify your instruction in the moment when kids need it most. But starting off with less and getting kids used to it is definitely a good way to think about it. And then I think, yeah, for the 40-minute classes, I'd share the same thing about data. You know, it could be that you're assigning homework problems. It could be that you're every other day you're assigning an exit ticket. And then when kids come in, you can go back to this assignment report and use it to say, okay, we're not going to go over all, you know, 6 problems that we assigned here. We're not going to have you all correct your own work and spend 5 minutes just doing that. I'm going to go ahead and pull these, you know, low average scores out and say, I noticed we struggle with these problems. Let's go ahead and break these down and talk about what may have gone wrong. Or there was this common wrong answer. Your warm up today is to try to figure out where it went wrong. Compare your work to the ideal work up on the board. Where did the mistake occur, right? So you have some options there to use a much smaller amount of time to really zero in on what kids need to review. Even, you know, so even if you only have 40 minutes, you can do that in more like 5 minutes or 3 minutes instead of having to spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes reviewing the previous day's homework or exit ticket. No problem, Christine. So now I want to go through just a few common implementation challenges and sort of our recommendations for avoiding and ameliorating those challenges as you might experience them. And these kind of come from all of the different teachers that we work with in our research studies, just teacher users across the country. We have over 20,000, really hearing what they're experiencing and getting a solid idea of, all right, what are these key challenges when the teachers are getting started? How can we help them to address those challenges? And yeah, oh, that's a great comment. What did Beverly share in the chat, Viviani?
She said that's a great idea to use real data to review misconceptions as a do now routine.
Mm-hmm. And again, that, you know, in your regular teacher routine, you may not think about this, but, you know, when you're connecting student generated data to the interventions you're staging in your class, you're helping kids to understand that they're doing what they're doing because you're trying to help them based on how they performed on the previous assignment, right? And we might take that for granted sometimes in the classroom. But if kids understand how you as a teacher are getting from point A to point B, they're going to be much more likely to be invested in what you're having them do in class and also in using assessments. So that's a very good point. So there are some common challenges, like I said, and so we want to think about how we can anticipate those and try to, you know, mitigate them or prevent them from happening so that students have a positive experience with assessments. In the first challenge, we want to address students pressing show answer. So based on student time spent on the assignment, you notice students are rapidly clicking through assignments and pressing show answer for most of the problems. And by the way, for these challenges, we're going to go through a scenario, a possible explanation or common explanation, and then common or useful solutions that we propose and resources that you can use. So in this case, students may not understand how accurate data will help you as a teacher support them with being successful. So they may think, oh, I'll just click through and I'll be done. And, you know, that's it, right? Or they may legitimately not understand what they're working on. So that's certainly one scenario. But either way, if you want to build student investment in actually completing problems and assessments with fidelity, it's going to be useful, as we already talked about, to review data with students and show its value and importance, and also that it's low stakes, right? It's practice. And then clear communication on how specific data are driving your instruction. So those kind of already came up a little bit in conversation. We have our resource on interpreting the assignment report. That can be super useful. It'll remind you of those key data points that you want to share, and just really thinking about anytime you're having kids do problems and assessments, what are those key data points, those problem averages, common wrong answers, what are those few key data points you can pull out to modify your instruction to meet your students' needs? In challenge 2, students are frustrated that their score lowers even when they eventually get the question right, and they're worried about how it will affect their grade. We know that kids are going to come into class expecting that any number score put on an assignment is a grade. They're going to think that anything, unless you tell them otherwise, that any assignment they're doing, they're going to be graded for accuracy, right? And so that kind of will have a tendency to diminish students' willingness to engage in practice. In other words, take a risk. Maybe I will answer this question incorrectly, but they need to understand that that's okay. And we kind of help you provide that experience, right? So they think they're coming into class and they're looking at that number on their assignment report or looking at the score bar as they're answering a question, and they think that score equals a grade and that a lower score is bad, right? Because lower grades are bad. And so we recommend giving students an opportunity to get comfortable with answer formatting and assessments, number one, and telling students how you're going to use the data and any implications for grading before any assignment, right? It might be that you don't use the score as a grade in any context, right? And so for those initial assignments, messaging every time, okay, this is practice. It's going to help me figure out how to best help you and meet your needs in class. Make your best effort, but if you make a mistake, you're not going to be penalized for that. So give them that space so that they're willing to practice and show you what they really know and be vulnerable with you. And we have a resource available here around why scores are not grades. And again, just as a reminder, this PowerPoint will be sent out to those who came today with active links so that you can access any of the materials that we referenced today. In challenge 3, we're talking about a low student completion rate, right? So a teacher notices that only 60% of students are completing their assignments on time, preventing the teacher from having enough data to make the platform useful. If only half of your kids are doing the work, you may still be able to use that assignment report data, but it's not giving you a full picture of where students are, and it's going to make it harder for you to use that data to drive your instruction in a meaningful way. So it may be that students don't see the value of the platform and they need more support so that they're comfortable completing assignments. And so we recommend modeling for students how to complete an assignment, give them time to practice with it, and then share our tutorials. One resource that we provide to help students get used to the platform are our student practice problem sets. And again, these are not content-based. They're designed to teach students about the features of the student view and assessments, how it works, what they should expect to see. And you can do that before you start assigning rigorous and challenging coursework through assessments. So I want you to take it, now that we've kind of gone through those 3 challenges, I want you to take a moment and in box O in your implementation planning guide, write down which of those 3 challenges feels most salient to you. So again, we were talking about low student completion rates, students misunderstanding scores, and students pressing show answer. Which one of those feels most salient to you? And you can feel free to include a strategy you'd like to use to confront that effectively, or we can, potentially discuss a few as well. So just take about 1 minute and think about what common challenge feels most salient to you and jot that down in box O. And we'll come back together in 1 minute. Okay, so as we sort of wrap up our thinking around this question, if you could share in the chat or unmute and share aloud, which of those common challenges feels most salient to you? Maybe you've experienced it yourself. Just share those in the chat or share aloud.
Yeah, hi, Brian. I have had students that I feel press that show answer a little bit more quickly than I have asked them or that I would like them to. So
Mhm.
there had been a few times when I assigned the problems, I told them that if you hit show answer, it's going to lower your score. And I'm not going to give you credit for that homework assignment unless you get 60% correct or more, or get that 60% or higher. So
Mhm.
think about that before you click that. Review your notes and see if you can get the answer without, relying on that.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, there are a couple of different ways you can kind of think about this, and it may be useful for you to jot down some of these ideas in your implementation planning template. Um, but one way that I like to think about it is, low scores or clicking show answer, whether you're doing it for good, because you really don't understand or because you're just trying to game the assignment. When a teacher sees that a student's clicking show answer, it means they're not demonstrating knowledge and they need additional practice. So if all you do is go through and click show answer, the natural conclusion for me as a teacher is that you need additional practice. So there's no way to escape demonstrating your knowledge through practice and formative assessment, right? uh, all roads lead back to you having to do something to show me what you know. And because we have the huge content library, you have the flexibility to sort of choose standards aligned content, to assign from if you need to assign some additional problems to students. And then there was another component to that. I think in the chat, Viviani, did someone share a thought in the chat?
Yes, Beverly says the students not completing the work is a challenge here. She always feels that she's chasing them down to do it.
Mm-hmm. So that's where starting with that small, simple routine. It may even be an in-class routine, although that if you can do that, it depends on student technology access, etc. But maybe you just start with that warm-up or that exit ticket. Have them get used to the platform when you're face-to-face with them and you have the ability to use your regular classroom management to sort of help guide them as they go. Once they get comfortable with it, once you start sharing their data with them, they want to see that data. They want to know how you use that data. They'll feel supported in knowing that you're responding to their needs based on the data. So you just got to start with something small, with maybe more control over the process in class. And then as students feel like the platform is useful and they buy into it, you can either expand that into other parts of your lesson, maybe sending them home with homework or weekly homework assignments, that sort of thing. So those are definitely things to sort of think about. But you really want to get students to the mindset where I need to do this so that the teacher knows where I need help, right? If you don't do these practice assignments, I don't know where you need help. And it actually makes it much harder and more frustrating for you in class when I don't know what you need, right? So that's sort of the way you want to approach the platform with students. That'll sort of help build that investment and get more participation among students. The other thing to think about there is if you're finding on any type of assignment, whether it's assessments or not, if let's say you're assigning 3 or 4 times a week and you're only getting 50% of kids to finish the problems, that tells you probably do need to scale back and focus on maybe 1 or 2 core assignments, and really hit home that those assignments are the key ways that you're driving instruction the next day. And again, if kids build a good routine around that and they're completing them, then you might actually be able to build off of that as well. But you definitely don't want to start off assigning 50 problem sets a week, or what. I know you're not doing that, but 50 problem sets a week, and then your kids are struggling to keep up with it. Then their experience is that A, it doesn't matter if I do every assignment. B, well, a lot of other kids don't, they kind of just do whatever in here, so I'm not going to put forth my best effort on the assignment even when I do it. So you definitely want to avoid that kind of mindset setting in. Okay, I'll pause here just to see if folks have any questions or other ideas. And thanks, Beverly. Most of the ideas that I'm sharing here just come directly from what we've learned from our own classroom practice and what we hear from, experienced assessments teachers. So I'm glad it's useful. Any questions? All right. Well, like I said, if any other questions arise, we can come back to those. And now I want to talk a bit about, as we close out today, making the most of ASSISTments user resources. So as we share useful user resources and Teacher Corner artifacts and blogs, you can jot down those which feel most relevant to you in box P of your implementation planning guide. So if I just go back to that here. In box P, if you see something that strikes your fancy, and we'll post some links to these in the chat as well. You can definitely jot those down or copy those links and come back to those, if you so desire. I'm just going to go to our user resources here. And so when I go to Help Center and User Resources, you'll see our user resources are broken down by category. We've got Getting Started, and probably the most useful resources here as you're getting into your routine include sort of your 5 tips for getting started, your student practice assignments, or the tutorials for Google and Canvas that will help to build your knowledge of how the platform works. Sounds like, though, y'all have used ASSISTments, so you might be familiar with that piece. And Viviane is sharing the link to our user resources in the chat if you'd like that or you want to follow along. And just a few other highlights here. So if you really want to focus on finding and assigning content, we have a variety of resources there that can help you either identify content you want or create custom problem sets for your students. We have a ton of useful user resources and reports and data that can help you understand student needs. And so you can check these out. In particular, how to interpret the reports. So if you go to assignment report or skill builder report, those are going to help you interpret the data. And then we do have support resources for both parents and students that you can utilize. We have our webinar library where you can see recordings of past webinar sessions. And we even have distance learning resources if you're still working in a hybrid or remote setting with your students. So we've created a variety of resources here. Definitely take advantage of them. We do find that a lot of teachers find these useful, even if just for reminders. Here for the students, we have our tutorials on open response questions, getting started in Canvas and Google Classroom. How you can support students with answering open response questions, how to interpret the student report. So really lots of different things that you can use there. In the blog section, we have a lot of ASSISTments teacher users that address different topics that you may find relevant to you in your own practice. So you can definitely check those out. And then in our teacher corner, we always have a monthly toolkit. So when you go to this page, you can go to our teacher toolkit and see the useful resources that we share this month. This month, we're focusing on those common implementation challenges. So we shared some resources and perspectives that can help you meet those challenges. And then you also have teacher-created artifacts that you can utilize. So things that teachers have created themselves, like a scoring rubric, so that you can still provide a grade, but it's based on students meeting behavioral expectations around the assignment, like completing it on time or showing work. So lots of different great things there.
Brian, we have a question here. Do you have a section of just exit slips, or do we just find 1 or 2 problems in the resources?
So we don't have a user resource specifically focused on exit slips, but when you are logged into ASSISTments, and let me go back to my teacher account here, and let's say you're assigning from Open Up or Eureka, and you're in a lesson. With our open education resources curricula, you'll see that the exit tickets or cooldowns are here, and you can always elect to choose some of the problems, but not all of them. You can also choose a couple of problems from here, save it as a problem set, and add additional problems to it as you like. So you can customize these somewhat to meet the needs of your students.
Okay, thank you. And I love that new feature. I forget when you had added it, where you can create assignments and have folders with called My Assignments. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, just to sum up, just to sort of sum up an answer to that question, inside any individual lesson, you'll see tabs that show you the activities that the curriculum makes available and that we then feature here. If you want to go to the exit tickets or cooldowns, in the case of Open Up Resources, you can go directly to that within the individual lesson. That is a little bit different from how we worked before, but should be easier to navigate as well. So.
Thank you. I don't think I ever noticed the tabs on those screens. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, like I said, it's new, so good to make sure folks understand how that works now. And Beverly shared, I see that she didn't know about the teacher corner, super helpful. Yeah, I mean, we really try to center teacher voices, those who have been able to implement assessments with success and get results, and find out what they think and what are their best practices, their routines. And so that's all the stuff you'll find in the teacher corner. Lots of useful resources, artifacts, teacher perspectives, etc. So yeah, we offer a variety of supports for teachers. You don't have to reinvent the wheel to figure us out. We're here to help you with all of these wonderful resources. And just for time's sake, and because questions have been coming in, we'll go ahead and skip this and keep it moving. And so just to recap, we talked about finding that strong starting point, one, even small section of your lesson where you really want to build a strong routine. Planning for your weekly routine, so thinking about when are you assigning, when are you sharing key data points with students, how are you using those data to drive your instruction, anticipating and navigating common implementation challenges. So some of those common things that, really if you're implementing with any tech platform, issues that you might confront, and thinking about how you want to be proactive about preventing those from becoming pain points. And then leveraging all those wonderful resources in the teacher corner and in our user resources to help you get what you need and get things going in your classroom. In the chat, Viviani is going to share our feedback survey. It should only take about 30 to 60 seconds to complete, and we do actually really appreciate any feedback that you can provide us. We do use our feedback survey data to drive how we design our future professional learning. So if you could click on that link that Viviani just shared in the chat and take about 30 to 60 seconds. Note that the webinar date is the 28th, and the title is the New User Webinar Part 3, Making the Most of Assessments, or using assessments with success, and just take about 30 to 60 seconds before we close out today to finish that survey. And I'll give y'all, like I said, about 60 seconds. Okay, and as folks are just wrapping up the feedback survey, and again, we do appreciate you for sharing your thoughts there. We have some different targeted webinars coming up that are sort of deep dives on relevant topics in teaching and learning that you may be interested in. In particular, if you go to our webinar sign up page, you can see that we have an upcoming targeted webinar. I can find it up here, on using assessments to address unfinished learning on October 26th. We also have a 30-minute deep dive on skill builders on October 21st. So definitely check those out if you're interested in attending those and learning more. And then again, you can always check out our recordings by going back up here to the webinar library and checking out the recordings of all of the webinars that we've delivered in the past, and view those at your convenience. We also have our Engage New York Eureka Math 30-minute deep dive. Actually, that is not happening, so we'll skip that. Just pretend I didn't show you that. So yeah, use our website for user resources. We have our Facebook teacher user community that you can check out and learn more from other teachers of different experience levels. And you can always reach out to us at contact@assistments.org. Now, as we close out, I just wanted folks to share in the chat or share aloud. What's the biggest takeaway next step that you came away with based on today's session? And again, you can share your thinking on that in the chat or unmute and share aloud. One big takeaway or sort of next step you're thinking about based on what we discussed today. All right, I noticed something come in the chat, Viviani.
So Beverly says that she appreciates the time here to think about this practice and using assessments in the classroom. And Christine says just inspired to try using it to do daily or for at least a few times per week or like an exit ticket.
Yep, and that's great. So focusing on that one part of your lesson or smaller parts of your lessons where you can get started with that routine, that's great. Practice and consistency are definitely going to help here. So once you start that routine, being really consistent about it and always coming back to it is going to help to build good culture around it among your students. And then Beverly also mentioned, it looks like the resources and our teacher mentors to give and take ideas. Absolutely. We know that teachers, it's better when y'all work together and discuss things together and strategize and plan together. It's easy for us to fall into silos. And so having those thought partnerships are really, really important. Okay, so like I said, you can reach out to us at contact@ASSISTments if you have any questions. I hope you all enjoyed today's session and you have a good rest of your evening. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close things out. And I hope you all have a great rest of your evening and rest of your week.
Thank you, everybody.